as we continue with our discussion on the cost of living. Still with me in studio is Steve Biko-Wafula, a research analyst, lawyer, and CEO of Hidalgo Group. And, of course, joining us virtually from Nakuru is Beatrice Muraguri, an educator and counseling psychologist. Thank you both for staying on. Steve Biko, I want to take you back to something you talked about, the fact that there's such a discrepancy in pricing in terms of fuel here in Kenya and our regional partners, Uganda and Tanzania. And a tweet here, someone saying, I'm tired of the COVID excuse. How come the price of fuel in Kenya is higher than in Uganda, yet the same product is passing through the port of Mombasa, as you mentioned earlier, yet both countries were in the pandemic or are in the pandemic? So what's going on there?
I think the first thing that we need to accept is that Kenyans need to connect the aspects of leadership and the quality of their lives. Poor political leadership means poor economic decisions, which ultimately actually affect our individual lifestyles. Because one of the things why things in Kenya are very expensive, from buying cars to fuel to domestic products that we manufacture, bread, cooking oil, soap, is because of our taxation regime. And many will argue that maybe because of devolution as a kind of made a ballooned up executive made it very expensive. But for me, I believe poor leadership is actually what's leading us to poor economic policies and poor economic implementation. Because when you look at our tax regime, we're one of the few countries in the world where we're actually overtaxed. And the ripple effect of this is actually very great, because when you look at the healthcare aspect, when you look at manufacturing, when you look at agriculture, the three key components of the economy that actually make a country to thrive. So you'll find that it's cheaper to fuel in Rwanda or Uganda than in Kenya. You'll find that the ripple effect of high fuel prices is actually very diverse and in a 360 aspect, from expensive agricultural inputs and products like seeds, fertilizer, insecticide and things like that, to transportation. Now, most of the food that we buy from Soko Mjinga in Naivasha and Marigiti in town, in the CBD, most of it comes from Chwele. So that means cost of transportation and logistics aspects will actually go up by 37% from the recent fuel increase.
Right.
This means that basically your food on the table, ugali, sukuma wiki, managu meat, is actually going to be more expensive, between 17% and 33%. So
give me an example of what that actually looks like.
So basically, if an average family of four, husband, wife, and 2 kids, and maybe house girl, 50,000 shillings will not be enough. If husband brings in 25,000 and wife brings in 25, after taxes, we're looking at maybe 40. It will not be enough to even pay rent, pay electricity, and increased transportation. Fuel means higher electricity cost. Right. This means more cost for manufacturing. Basically, everything becomes expensive. And in terms of percentage, basically it means your 1,000 shilling becomes valueless. Because now if you compare 1,000 shillings in Nairobi and 1,000 shillings in Lamu or Webuye, the value of 1,000 shillings in Nairobi actually becomes very useless, because you can now, you're buying units of electricity for 1,000 shillings. They'll give you maybe between 30 and 42 units. Given how they actually gobbled up, that will take you for a week. It becomes very expensive. So the ripple effect of our decisions when it comes to political leaders cascade down to economic decisions, cascade down to economic implementation. Basically, at the end of the day, when you look at a manufacturer, for example, Bidco, for example, by the time the product is coming from Bidco factories in Thika to a shop in Webuye, it's very expensive. And when you look at it, it's only taxes. When you look at the breakdown of the energy bill, a lot of it is going to taxes. And at the end of the day, I do understand why taxes are high. And it's because of the decisions you've made. Yes, there's progress in terms of infrastructure. When you look at our road networks, it's actually very good. But I think we need leaders who will actually focus on what is important. Because Kenya is an agrarian economy. Agriculture is actually the main staple of who we are as a people. So because, we've done amazing roads in key cities, but how is a farmer in Chwele connected to a buyer in Nairobi if the road between Bungoma and Chwele is actually not fixed? And
maybe Kenyans would be a bit more agreeable to the high tax regime if they actually saw the taxes
if we actually saw the benefits, because hospitals are not working. I lost my cousin because they went to a BADC hospital and they didn't get the kind of treatment they were supposed to get. So Kenyans are not seeing value for the high cost in terms of development we're doing. Yes, there is. I can be able to see it. When I'm driving my car, the roads are good. Actually, in Africa, Kenya has very good roads. But you see, when you're looking at the ordinary Kenyan who actually has no car, most of the time they're walking, most of the time they're in the countryside. These fancy roads are not actually going to be of benefit to them.
And on that, let me bring Beatrice in. Beatrice, I want to get your thoughts on just how things have changed when it comes to your household income. Just take us through an average in terms of budget. I was reading an article that was talking about a majority of household income for the average Kenyan family goes to food. We've seen the food costs go up from what we showed a bit earlier on in those graphics. But for you and where you sit, what has changed in terms of your household income?
Thank you very much, Victoria. New challenges calls for new patterns of thinking. And if you cannot change a situation, you adapt to it. So in my household, I realized that in 2020, I need to change my way of doing things and my way of even thinking, and I had to incorporate each and every member of the family. A roll of tissue paper that could even go for, let's say, for 2 days, we realized it could even last longer if it was well used. So what does that mean? As a family, we sat down and did what we call stock taking. Just like in business sector, whereby for you to know that you are making profit or loss, you need to do what we call stock taking. So we sat down with my family, and it being a young family, as a psychologist, I had to look for words and the way to package the information that, you know what, we are now going to be scaling down. In terms of, let me take an example of buying fruits. Yeah, instead of buying a variety of fruits, I was able to package the information to them that even one variety of fruits, it's still a fruit. Yeah, instead of buying oranges, watermelon, bananas, because the pocket was straining. The pockets were straining. So we had to ensure that we are selling the idea that even this one variety of fruit is still going to work. Again, in terms of Steve Biko, I was able to explain how the costing of product changed. Across the year, the way it changed, it did not match the pockets. So that means, as a family, again, I'm talking about my family as an individual, as a family, we had to first of all check what is remaining in the account and for how long it's going to sustain us. What does that mean? If you are using 2 cars, then it has to be, 1 car has to be used, and you still reach the destination. Because the issue here in 2020, you are not just to go achieving our dreams. We were looking for the survival as a family. And I was saying, Victoria, that you will not be remembered for the things that you avoided, but you remembered by the things or with the things that you are able to survive. So here we are as a family, and scaling down our expenditure does not mean that you will not go back to where we were.
Right.
We will still go back to where we were, but now we have to come up with a program that will ensure that we will not sink into financial problems that will actually now bring other issues like mental health issues.
Which we'll get to, certainly. And on that note of survival, you find a lot of Kenyan families are in that mode. They're in survival mode. And I really want to know, when it comes to looking out for the consumer, who is doing that? You talked about earlier bad leadership translating to the current situation that we find ourselves in. Regulations like the Price Control Act. I remember last year the Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Munya saying he would invoke it to protect consumers. Do such moves actually help shield Mwananchi from, rising food costs and fuel prices? Are they effective, or are these just simply regulations on a piece of paper?
I think, sorry to say this, but I think the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture is just trying to be a populist. Because one, we are a liberalized economy, which means that the market prices are dictated by the doctrine of supply and demand. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, high demand If there's too much demand and less supply, prices go up. If there's too much supply and less demand, prices go down. It's common economic facts. Unfortunately, what needs to, you see, I talked about the issue of decisions that cascade, consequences, choices that have consequences. When you look at manufacturing and agriculture actually correlate. For such a thing, for price control to actually be enforced, will mean we need to look at how we do import-export business. Mm-hmm. We need to look at our balance sheet in terms of import and export. We are actually a net importer as a country, and that is a very major problem because we are not, COVID, if there's one lesson that COVID should have taught this country, is the need for self-sustainability in terms of manufacturing. We get toothpicks from China, we get onions from Tanzania, we get eggs from Uganda. We have better soils, better resources, and we talk about a better digital economy. So for me, the thing of a price control is actually might not really work, because if you bring in, like I remember when the government did a subsidy for ugali, the 2 kg pack of maize flour, public tax money was used to actually create a subsidy for the manufacturers. Mm-hmm. The manufacturers were able to get maize at a subsidized price for them to actually be able to meet the cost of manufacturing. What we need is a government that will look at reducing down the cost of production, cost of energy, cost of transport coming down, so that production of basic goods can actually be cheaper. And we need to actually increase taxes on imports that actually challenge and create competition for farmers, especially in things like sugar, salt, and agricultural produce. The other problem we have, and where there's actually where things like the price control actually might not work, is because we don't add value to agricultural produce. We export a lot of coffee to German, and then German now produces it into value-add products, and then we import it back, which is actually, we lose more money when we send our raw products out. So it all boils down to the kind of policies, economic policies and legislative policies that our parliament is actually enforcing. Currently, I think our parliament has actually become toothless because many people, ordinary Kenyans, are suffering. The issue of sugar, I've seen the price of sugar actually going up, and oil, cooking oil. Yeah. Cooking oil is actually a critical aspect of any family, whether you're a millionaire or you're a pauper. Cooking oil is actually a must. So the moment price becomes very expensive, you'll realize the quality of products will actually go down. And then the quality of life will go down now, because things like cancer will start coming up, because we are consuming cooking oil that's actually of a substandard quality, and then now our health becomes an issue. I'm asking Kenyans to connect dots and how their political decisions affect the impact of the quality of their lives at the end of the day.
And Beatrice, let me ask you this, because you live in Nakuru. Are you aware of those channels that are available to petition an MCA, an MP, a senator, a governor to actually do something to improve the livelihoods, or to improve costings, if you will, of key commodities that you have to go out and buy in the market? Are you aware? Have you ever tried any of those channels to advocate for yourself? Okay, good question.
For me, I have access to those members in the leadership community, but a common mwananchi may not be able to reach them. So what does that mean? They require somebody a go-between. And let's be honest, we live in Kenya, whereby sometimes you can never trust a go-between. You send a representative to go and tell a member of parliament, or rather an MCA, but these are the things that are affecting us at the grassroots level. But when they go there, they table their own issues. So at the end of the day, at the ground there, the common mwananchi is waiting for the member of parliament, or these leaders to come, to address their problems. So they are left, blaming the leaders. Yet it is the messenger who twisted the information for their own self-interest. So what I can request, if possible, and I've seen this happening even in my local community, if possible, if these leaders can sometimes spare some time to go and see and meet these local members of the community, whereby they will be able to get first-hand information of the problems that they are going through, then I think this is it will be a very good move, instead of trusting on people who will go and actually represent themselves for their own good.
Steve Biko, you mentioned much earlier when we were discussing Q2 is likely to be much worse. Walk us through what that actually means and possibly some things that can be done from the individual level and then from the policy level.
Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, when they released the data for Q1 2021, one of the interesting things is going to be the purchase, the PMI index in the manufacturing sector. And that is actually going to be very important because now we're able to see how the manufacturing sector has been, because there is a correlation between agriculture, manufacturing sector, and the service industry. And one of the things that Kenyans are actually going to feel the impact is the value of the 1 shilling. It's actually going to drop because now we'll be looking at schools will be back to full mode. As you said, the year began on a high tempo, back to work, trying to find things. One, we need to understand that last year farmers didn't harvest properly. So the ripple effect of that is actually going to be felt now. 68% of farmers actually say that they had reduced produce, and because of that, they're not sure how they're going to proceed this year, which means a high number of at least 48% of farmers might not actually plant this year because there's an increase in cost for farm produce, seeds, fertilizer, and this will cascade into expensive foodstuffs on the table and basic food, ugali, managu, tomatoes, onions, and things like that. So inflation is going to be a big challenge when you get into Q2. The issue of transport, logistics is actually going to be an issue. I don't think prices of fuel are going to go down because I know government has two options. Either push for parliament to increase the debt ceiling from 9 trillion to maybe 10 or 12, or increase taxation. And I know they've increased taxation and they're actually looking for more new areas to tax. So I know fuel has gone up. I know the issue of a digital tax is actually going to come up. I know the MCAs will promise something and KRA wants 30% of that. And I know we've struck a deal with IMF and World Bank for over 250 billion to actually plug into a recurrent expenditure. So any money you're going to get is actually going to go into two things: paying a recurrent expenditure for government, which is salaries for teachers and civil servants and the military, and then two, basically pushing the political will turning around. So a referendum, BBI, and preparing for 2022.
And I've asked about that, the political overtones. How is that likely to affect, the economic recovery moving forward also?
You've asked a very interesting question to my colleague about what is the public doing in terms of reaching out to the elected leaders.
Yeah.
The civil organizations, they're actually supposed to champion the rights of individual Kenyans in terms of increasing prices and things like that. Q2, for example, we've seen the leader of Q2 actually being heavy in politics and actually ignoring what the plight of workers is. So in terms of someone actually having an oversight role for the ordinary person, there's none. And what I know is the deputy president, for example, he's supposed to be helping the principal to ensure that the legacy, the Big Four agenda in terms of manufacturing, healthcare, education, and tourism actually achieved. I don't think any leader in government right now is actually focusing on delivering on that agenda because everyone is looking at how am I going to come back in 2022? Will I have a job as a cabinet minister in 2022? I'm a governor, I want to be deputy prime minister. How do I get BBI to be passed? So everyone is actually looking at the issue for themselves. No one is looking at it's the farming season. Locusts actually, I've seen photos on Facebook and Twitter actually of the locusts from Namanga going to Kajiado. So which means farming this year is actually going to be impacted greatly. One, by lack of access to credit by farmers, and two, the locusts, and three, basically, the rising political tensions. We see that the North Rift and South Rift are actually good places for farming, but given the challenges in terms of political hot tones, we've seen farmers in Njoro being told not to plant maize anymore. So the ripple effect of such decisions will actually have reduced production from the agriculture sector by at least 56%.
Oh, wow.
So that means my food on the table and yours will actually be very expensive. So Q2, Q3, and Q2, 3 are actually going to be very difficult unless we listen to what World Bank is saying. And the issue of debt is actually going to be a very challenging for us now because international partners and development partners will look at our stability and our status. How are we going to be rated? Stable, unstable, better? Because now we need access for money. to pay back our loans which are due. We have expensive projects that are actually going, and I'm sure President Uhuru is actually keen to finish them, which is a good thing.
Legacy projects.
Yeah. But you see, for me, we'll need now, what I can tell Kenyans is that they need to think of electing new leaders who will actually take advantage of what this government has done and take us to the next level in terms of focusing on agriculture and focusing on manufacturing and export.
So a lot we have to brace for quarter 2, quarter 3, and really the rest of 2021. Thank you so much. There is hope indeed.
Yes.
It shouldn't be all doom and gloom. Beatrice, thank you for joining the conversation as well. Steve Biko, as always, great having you, helping breaking down those numbers, oftentimes that seem too big to understand or comprehend. All right, and that does it for the conversation and Citizen Weekend. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. One Love coming up next. Good night.